I'll open the Monday, July 27th, 2015 regular meeting of the Eugene Planning Commission. And as is our custom, we reserve a few minutes at the beginning of each meeting for public comment. The public may comment on any matter except items scheduled for public hearing or public hearing items for which the record's already closed. And I'm looking at the audience to see if anyone wants to say anything. Okay. And then with that, we will move on to agenda item 2, which is the South Willamette Special Area Zone deliberation summary. And I believe Gabe sent out the summary of our final recommendation that we voted last time to send to council. I just wanted to check to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the way it is reflecting our recommendations, and if not, if we had any changes. Commissioner Borofsky.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. The only
and speak into the microphone.
Yes.
Yeah.
The only change that I would have noticed is when you were putting the minority favored option, it's a little bit vague, and it might be better to actually put kind of what that options were a little bit clearer. So, like, let's say the site access one. You put in what the option was, but then there was the little blurb about what the impacts and kind of the pros and cons of what that option were. It just kind of explains it a little bit more. You know, when it's going to council, it says, or on the parking one, minority opinion to increase proposed off-street parking requirements. That's if council's reading that, they may not be real clear on that. Whereas if you put the little box that was there, what the one that we passed one and what the option was, it's the same thing, but it also kind of gives what the delivers. I don't know. It's just was a thought. I don't know if we need to do it or change it, but it was something that when I was reading it, I was like, oh, I've got to go back and see what was that option and why.
We did those last week.
I guess my question is, when this goes to council, and I guess will it go just exactly like this, or will there be the actual options shown and listed?
Well, so we intend to provide council with a full record of materials, which would include all of the summaries of various options that were considered as part of the deliberations. So that'll be provided in sequence, essentially a reverse chronological order of all the materials you've seen through the hearings process. So it'll all be there.
Maybe, maybe just like a pointer to where, that's page 3 of this packet type of deal. Just so that they know where that option, they can look for it.
Because even the ones where like option 2 that we approved, they would need to go to that area to see option 2.
Yeah, and maybe at least just a pointer to where in the packet that is would be helpful.
Okay. Commissioner Baker?
I was going to suggest
rather
than a pointer, because that requires you to jump around, that we just put the recommendation in with that packet and still give them the summary of all the recommendations.
And just add
this piece to that, so that way it's clear when they read. That way you read a document and it's, you know what goes on, rather than having to jump. It's very inefficient to have to jump back and forth and try to figure out. And that's just a little bit of duplication, but I think it's better than referring back. That way it's all together, and still you have a separate brief summary.
So it sounds like there are a couple of options here. We can go back and revise it to try to reincorporate all of those materials within the document that summarizes the option, or we can attach it and refer to it.
Here's a thought that I have is, with what we had, and I'm not sure I brought that particular one, where we had the, this part here. Will this be, when it goes to council, because that would be a lot to put in, I guess, when this goes to council, would this be just right before the actual summary? And if the summary's right after that, I guess I'm wondering, would it be that difficult to refer back to it?
Well, just for clarity, I want to make sure. So we have, I believe, the full summary of options in the packet dated July 6th. And at our last meeting, we referred back to that for purposes of discussion. And that would be the document that we could either attach to the summary for reference, or in effect what I believe Commissioner Baker's asking is to
Interlace them.
them and recreate it with both, I mean, to essentially combine that document with the summary and
still have a separate summary if they want, because it's sort of like an executive summary.
Go ahead.
I guess for me, I was just concerned that, I mean, if it's this summary, that's less than if it's this, and it probably will be both.
they'll receive all of that.
Exactly.
They need
exactly.
to, as a matter
and that's
of...
why I was hoping that if
Well, it's this, it's not not that one.
it'll be all of this, I think.
Well,
So
no,
it doesn't.
This is the one that we had for each one, and then there were a lot of other ancillary
Right.
materials.
Commissioner Jaworski.
Yeah, I would support something minimally increasing it, either a page reference or nothing more. The reason for that is if all they're going to see, besides the fact that there's an attachment, if all they're going to see is this summary that shows this, and you have votes of 5-2, you're going to have more verbiage and writing and options all under the minorities, which is only the 2. And I think that would confuse a counselor to look at this and say, this was voted, but look at this, for all this written up for the 2 that were in the minority. I just don't agree with that, so I have a problem with that.
And I think, from my perspective, I think keeping it a little shorter and more readable is more likely to...
And that was staff's intent, was for brevity and simplicity, and to the extent any counselor or any other party wants to dive deeper into the record, all of that will be available. And
Okay.
So would it be a problem just to put the reference to like what page of the PC packet that's in? That wouldn't be that hard, would it?
that would be pretty simple.
I would be fine with that.
Okay.
Or just say it's something like details, see page.
Okay. Commissioner Mills?
I would support.
Microphone.
Thank
Sorry.
you. No, that's fine. I guess I would probably be more in line with minimal modifications to the work staff has already done, which is very good.
Yeah.
And I think putting page number references in the deliberation summary
Yeah.
is a reasonable compromise that I think gets us most of the way there.
Okay. So you're okay with that? Commissioner
I'm
Baker,
fine.
sounds like you're okay. Okay. And I don't think we need to vote on that. So, Gabe, I think that sounds good. Did you have a...
No.
Oh, okay. I saw your hand. I just wanted to make sure. Okay. All right. So...
I had
Okay.
one suggestion. People may not agree with me, and I didn't want to bring this up in email because we were complaining about deliberating over email, and I thought that made sense.
I was complaining, yeah.
Well,
Okay.
so under articulation, I would just have added the word blank walls up to 150 feet long, because that was really the issue. It wasn't that you would have blank walls, it's just the code allows it. I'm up.
That's at the top of page 4 of the summary.
Top of page 4.
Item 10. Okay.
So again, if people are uncomfortable with that, we don't have to add it, but I just thought that was really the gist of the concern. It wasn't blank walls themselves, it was the extent that they could be.
I would have no problem with adding that clarity. That's very small.
That's... Okay. Any objection to that? Okay. I personally am not sure it's needed, but it's there, so... Okay. All right. I think that takes care of that. Unless there's other... Okay. With that, we will move on to agenda item 3, Rest Haven Memorial Park Metro Plan Amendment and Zone Change Deliberations and Final Action. Let staff shift gears here. And just to start, for the record, I was not at the public hearing, but I have watched the video of the public hearing, and I have reviewed the documents in the record, so I feel I am up to speed enough to enter into the deliberations. Okay. Heather, did you have a presentation, or are we just going to start jumping in and deliberating?
Yeah, I don't have
Okay.
a presentation.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I'll open up the floor. Okay, Commissioner Mills.
I'm just going to start in on the staff report. I'm going to go to agenda page 8. And just talking about, in general, the public notice, and I've got like three questions related to that. One was, these are pretty basic. It talks about within 500 feet of the project site. How was the 500 feet established? Was it 500 feet from each perimeter?
Yes.
Okay.
It's how we do all of our notices is from
Yeah,
the perimeter. Yep,
I'm just ignorant, Heather.
Yep.
Second question is, there was some confusion about which neighborhood organizations were or were not notified, and there was a change in jurisdiction, I believed, involved in some of this. Can you give us a brief summary about that, because that was a point of contention brought up by some of the testimony?
Sure. So on PC agenda, page 21, at the very bottom, I'm just going to read this paragraph and then see if it's helpful. So it's under the public notice, item number 3, and it's the last paragraph, clarify neighborhood group notice. After the applications had already been submitted, the redrawing of the neighborhood association boundaries resulted in the subject property changing from being within the southeast neighbors, to being within the Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association. As such, a referral for the application had already been sent to the southeast neighbors, because that was what was in effect when the application was submitted. But when I checked in with the southeast neighborhood president to see if they had any questions about the application, given that, this had been applied for, or we had proposed redesignating it a year ago, and just making sure there weren't any questions about it, she indicated that the boundary changes had happened, and they had already forwarded the information about the application to Sheena, the Southwest Hills Neighborhood Association, and so that they were coordinating on that transfer. And so then what I did was I contacted the president of Sheena and just said, hey, do you have any questions? Because I hadn't heard anything from them, and I didn't get any questions in response to that.
So you didn't get anything from either neighborhood organization?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Baker.
Yes, I had a question on the PUD provisions. I just wanted to get clarity from staff. When it says the subject property was within South Hills study boundary, ECC would apply. Is the entire site within the South Hills study, or is only part of it? In other words, it wasn't clear from this what the, whether it was only part of the site that was the higher elevation part, or...
Oh, yeah. Everything south of 18th, every property south of 18th and above 500-foot elevations in the South Hills study. And so this whole property is in the South Hills study.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted clarity on...
Yep.
So we could, move on about... And related to that as well, so is there any of this property above this 900-foot?
No.
Okay, so it's all in the 500...
There is a significant portion that's above 701 feet,
Okay, that would be...
but not above 900.
Okay, so some part of it is in 500 to 700, some part of 700. And the PUD provisions are slightly different for those two categories, is that correct?
Well, this is the section that indicates whether or not a PUD is applicable. So elevation under Section A, if it's between 500 and 701, you also have to look at how much of the site is being developed and looking at slopes. And then under Section B, it's the portion above 700, but you're looking at whether or not just the portion above 700.
And just
to
to clarify, in the event that a PUD is triggered, the PUD provisions would be the same, whether it's triggered under A or B, for example. In other words, the criteria for the PUD, the applicability of the South Hills study, would be consistent in the event that a PUD is triggered.
And
It does say any of the following conditions exist.
Correct.
As triggering that.
right, and there, just to clarify that, so there are at least 4 acres on this development site that are over 20%.
We have not done that analysis yet, and that's why there's no discussion. That's why we're really clear about not saying whether or not a PUD would be triggered. You basically would look at whether or not a PUD is triggered at the time that they're looking to develop it.
And it would depend on the scope of the proposed development as well.
Okay, and based on it, that this would be in the South Hill study, does that still limit the development to 6 units? As I recall?
5.
It's 5 per acre.
Yeah.
5 per acre? Okay. So essentially, all of this area would be limited to 5 units per acre?
The whole site, it would be limited to
Right.
5 units per acre.
I just
yeah.
wanted to, trying to clarify how much of this applies, South Hills applies, because of what we have here in the record or in the discussion doesn't say. It just says these would apply, and I just wanted to know what would apply. Okay.
I have Commissioner Mills again, but I want to give others a chance if they have.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, Commissioner Borowski.
I read the staff report as in regards to the Goal 8 and the parks and open spaces. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to. The staff provided us with a report and a map showing where the parks serve and where the parks are needed. And I see a fairly big spot right where this is of and a neighborhood park is needed. In the staff reports, they say that if it was rezoned, it wouldn't preclude a park in R1. But in my opinion, if you upzone it to R1 from public land or parks and open spaces, the value of the land goes up. So then, if you're going to want to buy a piece that is a zone that you can put a house on for a park, it's going to be more expensive. Now, I'm just saying that. I don't think that that's going to affect my vote, but it's just something that I want brought up, that there is identified an area that is in need of a park. The land is zoned for parks and open spaces, and we want to zone it to a R1, knowing that there's a need for a park there, although the pros plan hasn't identified the exact spot. I don't see any other land in there that is zoned parks and open spaces. It just gives me cause to reflect.
I just wanted to clarify. So the map at the back, let's see, is it at the back? Yeah. So the map in attachment D, which shows a 1/4 mile radius from parks and open space, is not what parks, and I think I mentioned this before, but I want to just make sure that that's clear. That's not what parks uses to determine whether or not a park need is needed. There's more factors that go into it, and I'm not sure that I can say what some of those are, because it seems like it'd be new evidence into the record. But I just wanted to be clear that that map isn't trying to represent that. We do know that the pros plan has indicated that regardless of what measures they use, that there is a need for a park in the area, but that pros plan is not adopted as a land use plan, and I think we talked about that a little bit in here too. So we can't use that to make a finding as far as needing a park in this location.
Exactly, and I understood that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to raise the issue,
Yeah.
knowing that the pros plan has identified the area for need of a park. It's zoned parks and open spaces.
And just to clarify, it's designated in the Metro Plan for park and open space use.
Right.
A portion of the property is zoned PL, a portion
Right.
is already zoned R1.
Exactly. I just that was something that I wanted to bring up to the Commission.
Okay. And I have myself in the queue, and I've seen some hands for like a second round, and I'm trying to make sure those of us that we could do a first round and then a second round. And I guess as I was looking through this, the concept now was that, the entire area essentially feels like a park to people, is what I was picking up. And I guess what I was seeing is if this were to be approved, there would still be 28 acres left as cemetery use that, in my view, seems like would still maintain an open character, much like cemeteries are and much like it is now, which I think helped me, with my processing of park and open space in this area effectively. If it's a Rest Haven Memorial Park and people, are able to walk through the cemetery as open space, to me that, that helped me with that whole idea of open space. So I just wanted to throw that out in my observation. I have Commissioner Jaworski next.
Yeah, just to go on this parks thing, just multiple question. First one is, when was the pros plan drafted?
What year?
95?
Mid-90s.
Yeah, I think it's in the record. I don't. It sounds like it was mid-90s.
Mid-90s. Okay. Second question. It identified the need for a park in this area. Could you define what it meant by the area? Because when I look at this map, I see 10 parks. So I'm wondering, what is the area they're talking about, and have any parks come online since that pros plan was written?
Just to jump in, I think that Heather raised the question earlier as to whether or not that's within the record. I think the Commission could take action to take administrative notice of the pros plan, but we've not presented it to the Commission as part of this decision on purpose, because it is not an adopted land use plan that would serve to direct a decision in this case. Of course, outside this process, you'd be welcome to review that for more information about the various criteria they use, but I would also defer to park staff as to their expertise in this area.
Okay, so if it's not in the record, then I would think that we shouldn't be talking the fact that it's an identified park area.
Well, what's in the record is just that we made a statement in the finding acknowledging that the pros plan stated that a neighborhood park is needed in this area. And we did that to kind of make sure everyone was aware. We know that there's a plan out there that says that. However, it's not a land use.
I know, I understand that. But the fact that either we talk about it, or since you referenced it, then my question is what do they define as the area? In other words, are they looking at this size, or when they defined the area, what didn't say neighborhood, what did they mean by in this area?
And I think that's what Gabe is saying, is that going into that level of detail is not in the record. We didn't talk about that. I didn't bring it up. I don't know what the area is. I can tell you that they identified it as a need for a neighborhood park.
So when things are in the record, we can't ask for a definition of what that was? Is that my understanding?
My suggestion, just in order to be careful about the quasi-judicial nature of this process, would be that staff's preference would be, if you're going to go there, so to speak, and to review that plan for more detail, that you would take action to decide whether or not to bring the full plan or administrative notice of the full plan into the record, just as a matter of precautionary matter.
Well, the only reason I'm referencing it is everybody else seems to be going there, is all that I'm saying. And if people are going to go somewhere, I'd like to have definition. Otherwise, we don't go there. That's what I was asking.
Right. And our suggestion is that our recommendation would be not to go there.
Okay, great. I'll go with that. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Mills. I have Mills and Baker.
I've got three things. The first is a very brief mention on PC Agenda page 2. It lists the testimonies, and it lists 2 as neutral. One of them, I'm just going to make a point, was, I would say, listed as neutral, but I think was very much basically citing all reasons why they were very concerned. I would label them as more of an against rather than, even though they labeled them, checked off the neutral box. So that's just a point for the record. Secondly, I'd like to go to Goal 5 for a moment, and I'm going to just kind of take staff, I think, to task a little bit, where they say things where you use phrases like, I've got to find the correct page for a moment here. It says local governments, this is the first line on page 9, per your local governments are encouraged to apply Goal 5 in consideration. Of course, this is for Papa. So maybe I might be looking
Are
at the wrong
not
place.
required to apply Goal 5?
Let me just ask you, Heather, I think
Yeah.
there's a place where you say that you're not required to maintain an open space inventory relevant to Goal 5, but Goal 5 does encourage you to do that, does encourage the city to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my only
Right.
point there. And so we're not, I think I'm understanding we're not doing that, but state law encourages us to do that. That's my second question. I've got another one after that.
Well, so the full administrative rules that are cited in the findings really spell out when the city's required to consider Goal 5 with a plan amendment like what is before you now.
Right.
And our finding is that essentially it does not affect the existing Goal 5 inventory. We have an adopted Goal 5 inventory that regulates this property with the water resource overlay for its stream corridors. And so, and to the extent that a PUD might be required in the future for a development plan, those criteria would also help to look at and address issues around tree preservation, open space, and compatibility. So-
This is all relative to the amendment itself.
Well, in effect, the amendment would not change those regulations as they apply to the property.
Let me go to Goal 8. And this is, once again, a little bit of wordsmithing here.
Okay.
Last sentence, Goal 8 ensures provision, last sentence, it says Goal 8 also allows but does not require. And once again, I'd say that allows is a little weak. I think it's encourages, because I'm reading the administrative goals should be made based upon adequate research and analysis. An inventory of recreation needs in the planning area should be made based upon adequate research and analysis of public wants and desires. And I think, we kind of heard a lot of testimony about that. I think the map is very useful. I think our own PROS study tells us that we need the open space. I'm a little concerned about just saying that the cemetery space is enough. I'll stop there. Let the others go.
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I would have brought this up, but I didn't want to keep talking too much, so I let. I appreciate.
Commissioner Mills has already asked for a third round. So.
I appreciate Commissioner Jaworski bringing this up. I was the one that requested the map. I appreciate the map. It's very useful in understanding the issue. I also have concerns about rezoning property, and now we're buying more expensive parkland, and I was going to ask staff what's the typical difference between the costs of R1 zone property versus public land. And the other question I had is, we keep talking about the cemetery site as remaining a cemetery, but we're proposing to rezone it to R1. Cemeteries can be relocated, so we aren't. I don't quite understand what's going on here. I mean, just because it's a cemetery, if it's zoned R1, it's not. If it's left, if the cemetery part was left as public land or whatever, then there wouldn't be an issue. But now we're rezoning the entire property to R. Is that my understanding is correct?
Well, I believe part of the concern here, both on the part of staff and the applicant's initiative to make this amendment, is to resolve a plan zone conflict where privately held land should not be. And our code essentially spells this out, and in the event that private land is sold, or public land is sold into private ownership, it needs to be rezoned. So this is a pre-existing condition that, in fact, was part of the city's initiated amendments through Envision Eugene to redesignate housing sites as part of our overall need for housing. And so while we can't control the future actions of the applicant in the event that the cemetery were perhaps to be relocated, we believe that the PUD regulations and the water resource regulations would treat it similarly as other properties in the South Hills to address those concerns around open space and resource protection.
Again, that you've gone circular logic, but you really haven't explained to me what guarantees that the cemetery stays there if it's zoned R1. In other words, it could be relocated.
It could be, under statute.
So it doesn't matter to me. I just wanted to know that. It doesn't matter to me that PUDs might be required to make it housing. But, and my other follow-up question to that is, are there any other properties in the city of Eugene that are currently zoned public land that are privately held? For example, the mausoleum or any of that area over on the other cemeteries that are not,
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I can say that there are other cemeteries that are zoned R1.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I was concerned about other properties that happen to be zoned public land that were privately owned.
And I can't think of any specific examples, but again, if there are, that would represent a plan zone conflict that ultimately the city would want to resolve, as is the case. In this case, the applicants initiated the application to resolve that conflict.
Well, would there be any way of rezoning it with a public land overlay for the cemetery? In other words, is there any other way to... we keep talking about the cemetery will be there, but we don't have any land use mechanism to make it there if it's zoned R1. It's all relocatable.
The public land zone is intended to regulate publicly owned land, and so I'm not sure that there is a way consistent with the code to do what you're suggesting.
There's no overlay that we could provide on R1 property that would require it to remain in open space?
No.
Okay.
Commissioner Nicolello.
Yeah, so on page 20, I think that there's a part of the staff report that really stuck out to me because I originally was concerned with the fact that it wouldn't be located as close to other parks as I would have liked, but, and I think this part is really important to say, is redesignation and rezoning does not prohibit this site from future park acquisition as city parks are permitted in R1 zoning. Further, it is not uncommon for acquisition opportunities to occur as part of or following the processing of a development application. And then the part that I think is also incredibly important, and Commissioner Randall brought this up, is it is recognized that cemeteries and other similar uses often have a semi-public feel to them and are utilized by the public unless otherwise restricted by the property owner. It is also recognized that the subject site is private property and not in public ownership. And I think that First Goal 8, as I understand it, pertains to non-urban areas, so I'm unsure even if it's applicability to this part particularly. But really, unless we're thinking of demanding some sort of exaction, I just don't understand how this can be criteria for turning down this proposed amendment. And then also, too, what was referenced earlier, that this was a public zone that's privately owned, and that's something that we need to rezone anyways. And frankly, we can project and I think imagine development as many different ways as we want, but we don't know, and what we're discussing right now, as I understand it, is a zone change. So I'm hesitant to really try and manufacture all of these different realities when, in fact, we don't have a development application in front of us. We have a zone amendment. So I just wanted to think maybe we can talk about that a bit more.
I have Commissioner Jaworski, then Commissioner Mills.
Well, I agree with what has just been said. I mean, I have seen other proposals, zoning changes to R1 on large open spaces with no parks within probably 1.25 miles, and there was it was not an issue. It was a zoning change. I feel that's what this is. It's a request for a zone change. And then hopefully that other parts that people have concerns about will be addressed at the appropriate time.
Commissioner Mills.
I just am searching for a little clarity, not taking issue with any of the previous two statements, but I'm a little confused by a statement on PC Agenda page 20, just above where the bullet point, staff has contacted the applicant's consultant, and above that, property owner has not indicated any interest in selling any portion of their site. And reflecting back to statements made by Councilor Cruz, that they didn't recall any contact, and I'm just trying to bring those things together.
Yeah, I had
It
talked
makes
to a
sense.
different consultant.
Okay,
Not
all right.
Mr.
So,
Claus. Yeah.
so the consultant you talked to said there was no interest
At this time,
at this time.
which
But we did get an indication of flexibility from Mr. Clues. Okay. That's it.
Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, again, I think I have to agree with Commissioner Jaworski, and other commissioners. My just concern is when we redevelop new areas, we need to be planning for parks, because it's something we don't do. I mean, I know Commissioner Jaworski has discussed this a number of times related to his neighborhood. So it just seems to me that we need to figure this out, and if we don't have, I don't know how other jurisdictions do this, but we're not doing it very well. And if we haven't adopted, we have a parks plan that's not part of our land use plan, well, then it doesn't help us with our land use decisions because it's not enrolled into the record, so to speak. But, we're doing this all the time. We're redeveloping a number of areas in much heavier density than they were, and we're not providing additional park area. And that's a real failing, because we need more parks when we, increase the number of residents in that area. And the map clearly shows that this area is missing a neighborhood park, and some other areas to the east as well are. So I just don't know how that's not to say we can't, that doesn't necessarily affect this decision, but we need to figure out a way to move this forward, because we keep doing the same thing. We keep increasing density, adding new areas, and for the most part, we aren't adding park space. And I don't know how we do that.
Okay. Heather.
Yeah, I meant to bring this up earlier, and I think we mentioned it in here that Parks is actually undergoing, I think you guys know about this, the Parks and Recreation planning effort to redo kind of the pros plan and the project list. And so that effort's going on right now. That is the process for identifying where there's a park need that neighbors and property owners can do input into to help inform that process of where there's gaps for future park issues. So that's the good news, is that we actually have that process going on as we speak.
I have myself in the queue, and I have a question of staff, and stop me if this isn't in the record and or tell me you can't answer it or that. When development applications come into the city, either for subdivisions or PUDs or that, is that a time when, if there is a need for parks are included or required, or however that happens?
Yeah, we coordinate with park staff on whether or not parks are needed in that area, and that's often a good time, because then the person developing the property has an understanding of what their development might look like for the property. And so whereas right now we're at kind of a higher level discussion of whether or not these types of uses make sense for the property, when you actually are at the development stage, you can start talking about where those kind of opportunities might exist.
Okay. And I guess kind of a follow-up to that is getting back to Commissioner Jaworski, that this is a zone change and a plan amendment and really not a development application. Yet, as an architect, if I were the applicant or representing the applicant at this stage, given this discussion, and was moving forward with the development plan, I would certainly have it at the top of my radar that there might be a need during my development plan for a park. And so I just, I guess that with that, again, I'm comfortable with where we're as far as the proposal. Commissioner Jaworski, Borowski.
Thank you. Yeah, I too am very comfortable with the proposal moving forward. I'm familiar with the property. I used to live in the neighborhood. I'm I think that having the South Hills area study in there and limiting it to, five per acre is fitting with and compatible with the neighborhood, and I think it adds to our buildable lands within the urban growth boundary that we tried to do this a year ago as part of our efficiency measures, and it just didn't play out timing-wise. I think that's a positive aspect. And so I heard what the neighbors had to say. The only concern that I had, and it's not one that would affect my vote on this, was just the price of buying parkland that's Metro Plan zoned as parkland as opposed to R1. And that's something that we don't have any influence on, or I hope we don't have any influence on. Which, we look at this thing and there's a little white dot in the middle, but I think that if we were to have this map in River Road area or north of the thing, there would be a lot bigger white dots than what we're seeing here. I mean, the South Eugene area is well served with parks and open spaces. Just ask Councilor Clark about that, or Councilor Evans, and they'll tell you what areas of the city are underserved by parks. And I think that South Eugene would be lower on that list. So I just wanted to bring that up because that was something that we had heard at the public hearing, but I'm in favor of moving this forward as is proposed.
Are you making a motion?
If people would like me to, I think I could move to. I don't know.
It sounded like one, so I was.
I'm just putting out. That's the direction I'm going. I think I could make a motion to. How would you like me to have that worded, Gabe? If we were to forward the proposal to City Council for action?
Forward a recommendation for approval of the applicant's request to the City Council. And as part of discussion, I would suggest that you directly consider the suggested alternative findings in the packet. In other words, would the Commission prefer that we amend the findings to insert those alternative findings?
So there's alternative findings under section 1 on page 19, where we just tried to, it's in italic text there, that we tried to kind of re-emphasize that the pros plan is not a land use plan. And then also on page 21 regarding the Metro Plan policy, A30, we had some alternate language there. I think those were the two.
Both we felt were important clarifications on those issues, and so we'd recommend that you go ahead and make those changes.
And on A30, just to be clear, it was kind of two options. One is if you felt that this policy was indirectly applicable, then there's the first example. And if you felt that the policy was directly applicable, we tried to reword the findings to make it a little bit clearer what we were talking about as far as affordable housing goes.
And I'll just add a clarification there. The proposed text is at the top of page 21. Staff's recommendation would be to go with the first option, considering the sort of aspirational nature of the policy and that it really isn't directly applicable as any sort of mandatory approval criterion. Staff would recommend the first alternative there.
And just for that, the first alternative is pretty close to what you had in the original findings that we read and that I brought question to.
Right. It just, I think, more clearly indicates that it's not directly applicable as an approval criterion.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a motion or not? I'm not trying to force you. I just.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. We have plenty of time to discuss it.
Okay.
And I haven't. I think before I'll put the motion on the table to move it forward with the the discussion on which one of the changes that the commission would like to put forward. And
Is there a second? Okay, second? Okay, so now we can discuss. Commissioner Baker.
Yeah, I'm in favor of the second change. I just needed some clarification on the first change. I try to speak into the mic here, too. I'm just questioning, do we have any public parks plan that has been adopted, a land use plan? In other words,
No.
no. So if this never happens, I don't know, we might want to change the wording here. Because
I don't know if it never happens. We just don't have one right now. That'd be a correct way to say that.
but if in our memory we have no recollection of a parks plan being adopted as a land use plan, then I think we should change the wording some, because that it just doesn't sound right to me if it's something that's never happened.
How would you change the wording?
Just say it's a parks plan and separate from land use, our current land use plans. In other words, we don't imply that we adopt these if we've never adopted them as a land use plan. Just say that it's a parks plan and not a land use plan, and therefore it's, it doesn't affect our land use decisions. And you could change the wording however you want to make that clearer, but that's my feeling. Just
I think we need more clarity on a specific edit. How it reads currently, the addition would be that only the project and priority plan has been adopted. However, it was not adopted as a land use plan. Therefore, it cannot be used as a basis for determining compliance with the applicable criteria in this case. Acknowledging this limitation, the city has consulted these documents and determined the following. The following paragraphs already in the draft findings as basically a summary of the status of the property.
I would just state it was not it was adopted as a parks plan, and not say anything about a land use plan, and just say for land use decisions it cannot be used as a basis for determining.
I guess. Oh, no, it's okay. I'm all the way at the end here, so I'm a bit tough.
I was processing that. Sorry.
No worries. I was actually just going to ask a clarification of Commissioner Baker, because I guess I'm a bit confused as well. Is there a particular reason, once again, and sorry if this is asking you to be redundant, but why you want to use parks plan instead of land use plan? Because I guess for what we are discussing in particular, saying that it's not adopted as a land use plan might be a more relevant description?
Well, it is, but it implies that these parks plans some of them are adopted. In other words, if we've never adopted them, we're implying that this one for some reason wasn't adopted, but we have no record of any parks plan ever being adopted, so it just seems somehow it's a little deceiving. We're implying that it wasn't adopted. We're saying it's adopted as a parks plan, but not as a land use plan. But if we've never adopted a parks plan ever as a land use plan, then it's strange to me.
Right.
Commissioner, go ahead, Gabe.
I was just going to say, while that might be true, I think there are some very practical and legal reasons as to why I wouldn't want to articulate that right here, and I'd want legal counsel available to do that. What we've attempted to do is really clarify the status of the PROS plan in the context of a formal land use decision, and so we think this is an important clarification to state the facts as they are.
It's a disclaimer, essentially.
In effect.
May I follow up on my question?
Sure.
I apologize. Yeah, I guess with that being said, I think that knowing that we haven't had on any of our parks plans adopted requires a certain institutional knowledge that might not exist amongst those who might be looking at this. So I would say, I'd be comfortable saying, however, it was not adopted as a land use plan, especially because I think even we initially thought that there was, that there was criteria for that to be used as a land use plan as well. And so I think that putting that in there, as Gabe said, kind of ensures that confusion doesn't happen. Kind of applying to the lowest, kind of applying to the folks who probably have like the lowest level of institutional knowledge, which is important, I think.
Commissioner Borowski.
Yeah, and I am comfortable with the verbiage as it is, just for that reason. We're trying to make clear and objective findings so that they're not brought back on appeal. And I think that this is clear. It may be redundant, but it's clear. A lot of times findings are redundant, but you need to put them in there because they need to be in there. And so I'm fine with the wording in the number 1. And on number 2, that was brought up basically, I think, probably because of my comments that I made at the public hearing, the fact that I didn't know if it necessarily even needed to be in there because I didn't, and this was my personal views, but that I didn't think that by putting this in, we were going to get affordable housing built there. And so I was kind of like, why put it in if we realize that chances are it's not going to be there. However, as far as findings go to justify the metro plan and the zone changes, I don't think that it has to be taken out. It was just an observation on my part at that thing, and I think that staff put it in and brought it back to us with 2 different versions. If staff feels like they want to have it in, I'm fine with the original reading of 830 and leaving it very simple, but as part of the findings.
And I'll jump into the queue here, and I guess back on number 1, I think it is good to leave it in, just for that disclaimer aspect. Really on number 2, I think I'm with Commissioner Borowski. I don't know that it hurts putting it in, but I'm not sure it's really needed. I guess unless staff feels that it might create problems. It doesn't look to me like it would create problems in the findings, but again, I want to be careful how we word things too. I don't think it really adds a whole lot, but
So
maybe
just to clarify, when you guys say keeping it in,
the italic portion.
So our recommendation is that first blurb that starts with the applicant cited. This policy is an applicable policy. Staff finds that this policy is not directly applicable because no specific housing development is proposed at this time. To the extent it's found to be applicable, like at a later date, it is met as indicated by the applicant's written statement, which is incorporated herein by reference. And so this would be a change from the findings, from what's in the findings right now. And I think we're recommending that we make that change. So you're keeping it in as kind of saying, it's indirectly applicable, and in the event that later down the road, if on appeal it's found to be applicable, we've incorporated it by incorporating the applicant's written response to that.
Recommending that first alternate as opposed to the second.
Yep.
Okay.
So I just wanted to kind of clarify that.
Okay. Did
I just wanted to indicate that I favor option 1 as recommended.
And that's what I was trying to say.
Okay.
Okay. Further discussion? Is there general consensus then of option 1 on item 2? Commissioner Baker?
Well, the only thing I'm concerned about option 1 is, from a defendability standpoint, if you the requirement is to accommodate affordable housing, and option 2 at least talks specifically to affordable housing. Yeah. So, I will go either way, but it just seems to me that from a defense standpoint of your decision, by specifically citing how it meets affordable housing, you are, strengthening your position. But, the other commissioners may not be as concerned.
And if I can clarify, what the policy says is balance the need to provide a sufficient amount of land to accommodate affordable housing with the community's goals to maintain a compact urban form. And so it's not saying you have to provide affordable housing. So kind of a key difference there.
It's a very high-level policy.
Yeah.
Do we want to vote on option 1 versus option 2?
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor of inserting option 1, raise your hand. Okay. Option 2?
Well,
Okay.
I'll go with, everyone else is gone, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay. Well,
I mean, to me,
It's
to me,
okay to
to me,
vote
it
no,
doesn't.
yes.
To me, it doesn't matter. It's
Okay.
more of what the staff thinks is more defensible.
Okay. So we'd go with option 1.
Okay.
So with that, further discussion, or are we ready to vote?
Those were the only two changes that. Okay.
All right. Well, let's vote. All those in favor of the motion to forward this to City Council with the recommendation to approve with those 2 amendments, raise your hand. Okay. Passes. All right.
Thank you.
Are we done early? We're done early. Okay. Items from staff.
Thank you. Yeah. Do have a couple of items. Following up on conversations that we had last week, so this is actually fortuitous that we have a few minutes. So, be a moment to pull these together. So mainly the items that I wanted to bring up are that we're looking for a couple of things. Commission said, hey, let's keep tabs on what's going on at council on a regular basis here. So I will be bringing the council schedule and also obviously the planning commission schedule to the meeting, so I'll be able to keep you guys in the loop about that. FYI, around council schedule, they have two meetings this week, one tonight, one Wednesday, and then they're done for the break. They won't be back until September 14th, I think, is the first meeting. We've tentatively scheduled an Envision Eugene update for the 14th. Things are actually starting to fill up on council's schedule pretty quickly already after break. Still looking for dates to nail down the South Willamette Special Area Zone when that comes back to council. We'd like to do that after the Envision Eugene update, so that could be in September, but it may not be to be in October since we have a bunch of other work backing up, some of which has critical timelines too. We've got kind of a long break this year, so as soon as I know those dates, I'll share those with you. Look, I ran out of time already. I beeped myself right out of the queue. So,
Want to talk now since he probably out of time? Okay.
So, any questions about council's schedule or what's going on? I think actually one more thing I wanted to bring up is I believe it is on the minor code maintenance elements that Alyssa Hansen brought forward to you all several weeks ago are actually going in front of council for action tonight. So that's it. Other questions about council activity? Yes.
Just a quick question. What time is the update? Is that the midday one or the evening one on the 14th? Just so we put a time with it.
Yep.
In case one of us wants to attend.
It'll be 5:30.
Okay.
That's during their work session.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that's tentative. This will all be finalized. I'm just kind of giving you a heads up as it comes out. So.
Okay. Mr. Borowski.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I attended the council, I guess it was a meeting, it wasn't a work session, last Monday, where the Envision Eugene residential land discussion was happening, and that did pass with the hybrid option. It was an option that the city manager put forward, basically to do no expansion for residential and within the UGB, no UGB expansion, and then move forward with urban reserves as a planning thing with I think it was a 3-year check-in on the numbers, and then also what I felt was one of the most important parts of the discussion, it didn't really get discussed, but important parts of the proposal was an allocation of dollars for planning staff to get some either consultants or bring on more staff to complete the work, and also be able to continue on with other areas of work plans that would have been pushed back had there not been the additional resources. So area studies in the South, or in the South University area and the River Road area, can go in conjunction with the work that's going to be done on the UGB expansion. So I think that was a positive thing that came out of that vote last Monday night. So,
Yeah, thank you.
More questions?
Yes.
yeah,
The staff, yeah, and then we will have items from commission, but did you have another one, Robin, did you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I just have a couple other items
Okay.
to throw out there. So we have the public hearing for Oakley co-housing scheduled tomorrow night.
That's Harris Hall.
Harris Hall, yep. Gabe will be there. So that is happening. We also have, so as far as council goes, I just did, actually, Commissioner Borofsky brought up the other item that I did want to mention, which was the direction to staff to move ahead. What this also means, I think, for you all in terms of timing for Envision Eugene is that the housing can merge back together with jobs, parks, and schools. So rather than having 2 sets of meetings with the joint planning commissions, now we can move through as an entire package with 1 set, which is going to be great in terms of efficiency. And staff are busy pulling together what that whole schedule and orchestration looks like. So I think it'll be a little more complicated getting folks together with both the planning commissions, but we'll pull that together this fall and let you know as soon as that comes out. So as far as planning commission agendas are concerned, we have, of course, as I mentioned, tomorrow night, the Oakley hearing. August 3rd, we have Envision Eugene comprehensive plan, and we also have I believe bike parking, Public Works Transportation has wanted to talk about that for some time, so we're working them in. Following that, on August 10th, we have scheduled the Planning Commission elections, and I wanted to prompt folks to be thinking about who you might be nominating, whether that's yourself or another commissioner. Prior to that date, I was thinking maybe we could get those nominations on the table so folks at least know what those are. You don't have to. Going into the elections, up until that moment, you can decide what you want to do. However, it might be useful for folks to know going into that, make things go a little smoother on election day. So maybe deadline could be August 5th. Give folks maybe 5 days ahead of time to consider that. Give you a little time to think about it if you haven't already. Yeah.
Do we still have Envision Eugene adoption package in the work plan preview on the 10th?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
Yep.
I just clarified.
Yep. So we can also, well, actually, maybe there's a better to do that. We will have a work plan preview. Again, this will be the latest iteration of, you remember the 9-foot work plan that we had several years ago? Okay. Well, we're still working on the 9-foot work plan, so we're down at like 7 feet or something. We're doing pretty well. But with
7 feet on a 9-foot plan, that's pretty good.
Yeah. With the kind of remerging of the jobs, parks, and schools and the housing direction for the UGB in the next 9 months or so, that's definitely going to be a top priority. But what we will see are some of these other items that have been priorities in the past, as in directed from council through the 2012 Envision Eugene recommendation, things like university neighborhood planning, area neighborhood planning, also River Road Santa Clara neighborhood planning, and then there's some other things coming up. For example, as part of Council's direction last week, we will also be looking at the needed housing standard. So that will be part of the work plan. I think that'll come under the heading of the code improvement program. That'll probably be the first juicy project under the code improvement. So as soon as we're available to do that, and we'll give you some idea of when that might come out schedule-wise as part of that work plan. Trying to think of other key items. There's a few other ones out there, so we'll share all of that and everything that we know. And also understand that commissioners in the past have had some priorities and some things that you were interested in working on. So maybe we could get those out there at that time as well. And then also look at your boards and commissions, your subcommittees, who's going to do what, since we've had a little bit of change on the commission here.
Maybe before that meeting on the 10th with elections, that might be a good time to maybe get us the summary of who's serving where currently.
Yes.
On
Yep.
those.
We'll send that current list out to you. It'll probably have Commissioner Duncan's name on a few of those things, and we can just kind of decide what to do with that.
Yeah.
Can you clarify what the 9-foot work plan is, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It sounds intriguing.
It is, yeah. It's basically shorthand for a very long list of things that needed to be done as part of the Envision Eugene project, and making it through the process of identifying an urban growth boundary specifically.
The list was truly 9 feet long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big long thing hanging from
Big scroll of paper.
Yes, that's right.
Tapestry.
Things we got to do.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We have Commissioner Baker, then Commissioner Brodsky.
Yeah, just more
Mills. Not for questions. Oh, not for questions. Okay. Are we on to items from commissioners?
It's just still questions.
Okay.
Just a clarification, the more mundane things. We have some tentative meetings scheduled in August. I'm just trying to get some clarity, 17th and 24th, and even the 31st, I think. If all of those are going to likely to come to fruition, or...
I have through the 17th for sure.
And on the 24th, this was another update item, is we're looking at some procedural training for commission. We're thinking about having Ann Davies join us, and we can talk about maybe some of the topics that commissioners would like to cover at that, and also maybe some things that have emerged as hot topics.
I will be on vacation.
You'll be on vacation? Okay.
You won't be chair at that point.
I won't be- no, I
There's
won't
a
be chair.
possibility that you may not be the chair.
No, it'll be a firm thing. I won't be chair.
Not necessarily, not if 5 people vote you chair.
As you're considering nominating people for office, talk to them first.
And the 24th? Oh, 24th and the 31st?
That would be the 24th.
It'll be the 24th.
The 31st, tentatively, we have scheduled a community design handbook update with Will Dowdy.
We did that before.
And
That's good. I like that. The 7th is Labor Day. Are we out into September at all on meetings yet?
well, September 14th, which is a Monday, we tentatively considered also doing an Envision Eugene vision/comprehensive plan update as well. So we'll be talking to council around the same time. It's kind of back to school. You know, we're going to kick off a work plan for the home stretch of Envision Eugene at that point. And we do have another number of other things to work in, I think, to Planning Commission's agenda. August 17th, I believe, already out there. We have the Oakley deliberations and action scheduled for that date. So.
Okay. All right.
I guess I do have a question.
Okay. I'm just going to come down the line.
Yeah.
And are we into just...
I have questions about what he
Okay.
just brought up. So
Okay.
a couple of questions. First is, I heard you say code improvements.
Yes.
Is there a possibility that if as commissioners we see an area of the code that might need improvement, that we can bring that up? Or how would the best, I mean, do you have to go to council and have it come down, or can it come up from the commission?
I think it's reasonable to come up from the commission, what we have right now in terms of a list of code improvements are things that have come up in the course of work over the past several years, and some that have been out there for quite some time, and I think needed housing falls into that category. There are also occasionally changes at the state level or what have you where you need to make tweaks here and there. So it kind of falls into two categories, maintenance and then improvement. And I don't see any reason why Commission couldn't bring items up like that. It would just be a process of prioritizing which items rise to the top to step through.
Where it fits on that 9 feet.
Yep. And given Council's commitment last Monday, I would say that the needed housing goes right up there to the top.
It's a small one, but I'm going to try and put something forward.
Okay.
Then the other question I had, it was regarding Oakley. And just this is kind of a procedural thing, and I don't know if this will be brought up tomorrow beforehand, but I know that when we did the Oakley public hearing, it was time limited. The applicant had a certain period of time, the other one had a certain period of time, and other parties were time limited. And I'm curious if the one person who is going to be presenting tomorrow will be subject to that same time limit.
So what we're suggesting is 15 to 20 minutes for the one individual that is afforded the opportunity to speak in the remand hearing, as well as the applicant. So 15 minutes each, and that's a suggestion. It's at the Commission's discretion to determine that, but that's what we propose to the chair at this point as a suggestion.
Okay. I would,
And
we should have a discussion of that, at that meeting to see.
Right. And to clarify, that's for oral testimony.
Right.
And those two parties would have a full opportunity to submit written testimony through close of the hearing.
Okay. That was my question. Oh, and one, now this will be, go ahead, this is a question.
Okay. Commissioner Mills.
Just about meeting dates. Not here you mentioned August 31. I'm showing an August 31 meeting in my calendar. That doesn't mean that it's there.
That was the community design update, I think, with Will.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And then,
And I won't be here then either.
yeah, I'm...
Because originally that wasn't, some of these weren't on the schedule originally. And then they were added tentative, so we'll probably have to send in whether we're going to be here.
And then I just received notification this morning, I'm not going to be available for the August 10 meeting. Change of plan. Apologize for the short notice.
Happens. Commissioner Jaworski, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, I just had a possible clarification on the August 10th. If I understood you correctly, there would just be a meeting where nominations would come from the floor. And the reason I'm asking that is in the past, the chair had appointed a commissioner to solicit a slate. Is this a change in how you're doing it, or how?
I think that's a great way to go if you'd like to be consistent with how things were done in the past. I think you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to go about that.
That's the only way I ever knew it was done.
Sure.
So that's what I was just clarifying, if there was a different approach.
If that's how you want to do it, that'd be great.
Give everybody a call, or do you want to split up those
No,
duties?
no. I'm not splitting up any duties. It's,
I'm happy to share.
no. If you're not going to be in an officer position, it would make sense that you would contact everyone.
Okay.
That way you have a
I can do that.
sense,
Sure.
even though Jeff said he can't be at that meeting, you have a sense
Sure.
possibly.
Okay. I will do that. I will contact each of you. Also, feel free to contact me. I mean, just send me an email and let me know if you have anyone you want to nominate, if you'd like to do it. Whatever. Yeah.
I was going to say that makes sense because Kirsten's not here, and she may not have a chance to look at this.
That's a good point.
This,
Sure.
since these are finished, issues, and we're not going to be coming back to revisit. She might, and so she wouldn't pick up on this. That way, at least, she would be contacted about whether she's interested.
Okay.
And just maybe a friendly suggestion that you might solicit interest in subcommittee assignments as well, just to get a sense of that coming in.
If you, then send that list out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
forward
Yeah,
that.
if we
Right
get
away.
that sooner rather than later, then that would,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, a couple of things I just wanted to make sure we got clarity. We had requested some legal counsel on some of the issues came up regarding our bylaws and the ability to testify.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's imperative that we get that straightened out so we know what, exactly what, because there's some confusion. That would, it's not clear to me exact wording whether that might even prohibit us from, if a counselor wanted to talk with, our buddy system even, that might put that in doubt. So I want to make sure that we have clarification about exactly what that means.
Sure.
About our communication with city council. Or
Maybe at that meeting where Ann is going to,
Yeah, I can give you a brief clarification. Yeah, we can go into maybe in more depth at that meeting, but just for now, so you guys know. So the bylaws say that, yeah, if you're there as a representative of the Planning Commission and council asks you about something, you basically reply with the decision of the commission, unless you're specifically asked otherwise, like, well, what do you think, or something along those lines. Otherwise, there's nothing to prohibit a commissioner from speaking as a citizen on a matter. So, for example, if somebody wanted to go to council and say whatever their opinion was on a topic, you could do that. There's kind of a difference between what you can do and what might be a good idea, given representing the cohesion of the Planning Commission as a body, I think is very important moving forward. So that's just one thing for you all to consider. But you're not prohibited from doing that. And the other piece of clarification was in terms of a minority report, commission can certainly choose, like you did today, what to put into any kind of a report or a memo that goes to council regarding your decisions. And if commission wanted to include some indication of minority views on a subject, then you would just go ahead and vote to do that. And so you have the authority as a commission to do that, but you would want to have the whole commission agree to that, as you did today.
one clarification, just so if our chair was going there and testifying on our behalf, and they asked him a question, he would have to defer it, or he could answer it from.
I think if I knew what our position was on it, I could share that.
Right.
I think, I think where it gets muddy, I think, is when we testify even as a private citizen, because even though we're testifying as a private citizen, I mean, they know we're on the commission. And I think it's always good if that happens, to make it clear that I'm speaking on my own behalf. I do not represent the views of, or not here to represent the views of the commission. I think that's a good disclaimer to put in at the get-go.
And it's also worth, I think, considering what you would be trying to accomplish with the minority report. I think the commission itself, when you make a decision as a commission, I think it's implied. Of course, it's because there's 7 people on the commission. It's not always a unanimous decision. That's pretty common. And when council asks about, for example, if the chair were to join council, which we've done in the past and we hope to do again for decisions coming up, I think the next one is probably going to be South Willamette. Whoever's chair at that point would join at the table for council and provide some kind of a summary of the Planning Commission's process and outcome for their deliberations, whatever you wanted that to be. And so if you were asked questions about it, you would generally respond as to what the commission decided. So.
Are there others who have questions of staff? And just, I guess I'll just remind us that just because we're done early doesn't mean we have to go the full time.
I just one other thing.
Okay, yeah.
I think it would be important for us as a commission to draft a letter of thanks to Commissioner Duncan for his 12 years of service and countless hours that he put in, not just in this room, but in a lot of other rooms. And I was hoping that that's something that staff could help us put together, and then we could sign and send to him or do something, because I haven't, he just kind of faded away, and that was. To me, that's kind of a shame, because I hope that's not what, I would like to fade away too, but...
Well, normally, there's usually some kind of an appreciation or a get-together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If there isn't one, I presume it might be, there's reasons why there might not be one, but
Right.
Or we just haven't heard about it.
I assumed that we were going to do
And I did too, but I haven't heard anything of it, so I said, the least is that we can send them a letter.
right.
Yeah, I did talk to Rick about that. Excuse me. He said he didn't want to have a big celebration like that, so we're kind of still thinking about ways to appreciate him and all the work that he's done. I'd certainly be willing to draft a letter on your behalf if you guys, as a planning commission, wanted to do that. That'd
Be great.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it needs to be recognized, I think.
Okay. Mr. Baker?
Yeah, just quick. I was just going to. This was before Commissioner Borofsky's time, but we had a wish list. We had a sort of set of issues that we had thrown in a hopper. So this whole idea of getting things on our...
How many of them? How many were granted?
Well, I don't know. Well, how many did
We
we?
only got 3 wishes.
No, how many did we spend time on? We had maybe 7 or 8 or 9 in there, and we covered like 2 of them.
Okay.
So we did make progress.
We did make some progress on it. Yeah.
And again, I don't know if maybe the staff could bring that old list, that's the ones that we didn't cover, back to us, and maybe Commissioner Borofsky can add to, others can
That's one of
add.
the things we probably worked on at the last
That was
retreat.
the last one, yeah.
So, yeah, I just wanted to mention that. For the newer commissioners, we did have a sort of a mechanism for that. Just
Okay. Anything else?
announcements.
Okay. Yeah, with the announcements, let's go.
I was just, if this is a moment for items from commissioners, but
Yes.
if not.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Let's do it.
Okay. There's just a few things I wanted just to ask of staff, and I can definitely ask this in writing too, because it's a bit of a list. But just in terms of commissioner resources, there's a few things that I've talked to a few other folks on a few other commissions, and I think it'd be really helpful if we were to have it here as well. One of those things is just kind of relationships between the existing plans that we have in motion right now and what those look like and what the hierarchy of that is. The next part of it would be an acronym guide. I would give my left foot for an acronym guide. And then also another thing, and I'm not sure exactly how to put this in writing, and maybe this is something that could be done orally, but just kind of the general direction of what the commission is doing. And I know that there's a work plan for Envision Eugene, and I'm sure there's a work plan for the commission somewhere. But if I could get a copy of that, that would be fantastic. Another part of this, too, is we've been discussing council relationships a lot, and I think that from what I've been able to observe so far, our desire for minority reports is because the fact that we don't involve council in the process early on, so there's just desperate push at the end to brief them on the various nuances and intricacies of these plans that have been stared at for about 5 years. And so my question is, what can we do to improve that? Personally, I don't think minority reports are the best option, but I feel that that's kind of what we're left to do at this point, unless there's more of an effort made to include council earlier on. So whether that's, I know we've talked about the buddy system and more work sessions, but just I would like to see some ideas from staff generating some ideas as to what that could look like. And then finally, something I would really request to see at all commission meetings, whether that's written or orally, is stating where we are in the process. I think that that's something that would be helpful not just for me as a new commissioner, but also for the general public. A lot of testimony from the public has included a bit of confusion as to what we're doing in the process, what this means. I think that's been observable with some of the meetings that I've seen just so far in regards to South Willamette and in regards to Rest Haven is, what does this mean? And as a general resident, I don't have the time. I can imagine that folks don't have the time to comb through all of these things in detail like we do. So that might just be something that we could consider doing. And then also I would love to see a list of the subcommittees. So I'd be happy to say that in writing. I know that was a lot, but that's just kind of my personal wish list of things that would help me do my job better.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Commissioner Jaworski.
I didn't have anything.
Oh, you didn't?
I just had an earlier question.
Oh, okay. Other items from commission? Commissioner Baker? Or announcements, I think you said. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to appreciate Commissioner Nicolello's comments, particularly regarding the acronyms for South Willamette. I think the public would be very, and the commission and the city council would be helped. We have a lot of acronyms in there about the SWA, and it's very confusing to look at that code and see those. So if you had a quick little acronym list for South Willamette, I think that would be helpful. I wanted to mention
Even for life in general.
yeah,
I think it's always a common complaint. I remember making the same complaint regarding acronyms when I came on board. It's just a bit of a steep
And
climb.
it's not just here at Planning Commission. There are other boards that I'm on and different things that I'm involved in that we are an acronym society.
yeah.
But go ahead.
And I just wanted to announce that there's a historic review board meeting about a month from now on August 27th at 8:30 in the morning in this building. I don't know that a room has been assigned yet, but
Sloat room.
Here.
okay. You can never tell if it's here or a third floor. So
Sloat is low, Sol is high. Sol is tall, Sloat is low.
We've arranged in advance to have the Sloat room for all the quarterly meetings this year.
All right. Well, with that, we're adjourned.